Well, I should be filming my garden tour right now. Not happening at the moment. So hopefully the weather lady was right this morning with the weather report that I heard, and that this is supposed to move on out a little bit later today. Alright you guys, so it is time for the weekly garden tour. Every week, well, almost every week, except last week. Because last week I was out of town. I had gone to North Carolina to attend a wedding and to see some family. Generally, every week I do a garden tour, and I'm doing it all through the garden season. I take you out into the front garden here, the raised bed garden, and I also go out into the in-ground no-till garden and share a little bit about what is going on in the garden, how things are doing, what we're struggling with, and the struggles have been real this year. One of you guys commented that gardening was not for the faint of heart, and that is absolutely the truth. It is not for the faint of heart, but it's absolutely worth it. So with that, let's get started. Of course, the first thing I want to share with you is that those massive storms rolled through today. Most of the day, actually. They started this morning, but my sunflowers survived. I didn't think they were going to be honest. Especially the one with the open head, because that thing was just slinging all over the place. I was certain it was going to snap. But it didn't. I do have a lot of tomato plants that have been pulled off of the trellis. I do have broken branches as far as these go, and unfortunately it is the tops of several of my tomato plants, which means these tomato plants on that trellis that were doing great have now been topped off. The tops are snapped. And generally what happens is, if a tomato plant gets topped off, then every tomato that is on that plant is going to rush to ripen because it thinks it's the end of the garden season. So I have a feeling that I'm going to be getting a bunch of ripe tomatoes on those plants pretty soon, which it is what it is. It's part of the challenge of gardening, and you just gotta roll with it. So as you can see, I'm up here underneath my great big trellis that is covered with both loofah gourds on this side, well, the vines anyways, and Kajari melon on this side. And we do have Kajari melons, quite a few of them. Now, since I have the Kajari melons climbing up this trellis, I have these produce nets, and I've mentioned them previously, but this is the first time you're seeing them on camera, I believe. These produce nets, I wrap them around the melon, as you can see, and then I tie them up there to the trellis. And what that does is it takes some of the weight off of the stem of this melon so that the weight doesn't snap it clean off of the vine. And thankfully these kind of held up through the storms, even though everything was kind of swaying all over the place. I've got another one down here. I've got one up there, and I am going to need to come out with some more of these nets because, as you can see, there are more melons that are developing and growing on these vines. But interestingly enough, these Kajari melon vines have gone not only all the way up the trellis, they are also climbing all the way up my sunflowers. Look at that one over there. You can see the Kajari melon vines hanging off of it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to secure melons that are growing up there. So if I somehow end up with melons all the way at the top of those sunflowers, and that Mongolian giant over there is probably 12 feet off the ground, they may be on their own. So all of these tomatoes in here, I've been really thinning out the foliage because these tomatoes, the plants got so thick, and the pest problems that I have been having have been so utterly brutal. It's been really difficult getting in here to take care of it. And the armyworms have been my biggest challenge so far this year, besides the blight that we were dealing with. They have been, I mean, I couldn't even guess how many of those things I have squished and pulled off of my tomato plants. So I came out here earlier today and I harvested all of the ripe tomatoes and most of the tomatoes that were looking almost ripe. Again, like I said in a video the other day, the pest pressure's been so bad that some of them, if they look like they're almost ripe, I'm just going to go ahead and take them and let them ripen on the counter. So here are the zinnias. These beautiful red ones. These things are just so intensely red that I mean, it's like they're glowing almost. These are the seashell cosmos that I've grown this year. This is the first time growing this variety. They are definitely very cool looking. Look at that. Now for some reason, this big clump of sage, this garden sage, is suddenly struggling. I'm not really sure what is going on here, but this is something that has grown so prolifically that I've had to like rip tons of it out. So I'm not sure what's going on, but then this stuff over here is looking just fine. So I don't know if something has gotten down in here. I don't know what's going on, but I have a feeling I'm going to end up pulling all of this out and giving this a little more space. And look right, I see right down there. And here is what I have been dealing with. These daggone worms everywhere. So then over here I have some dahlias that finally opened up. These are kind of later season ones. These dark colored dahlias, which I'm assuming are dahlias with the yellow centers, are still producing flowers. These were my kind of surprise ones. The bulbs were supposed to be a stilby and something happened. Wrong flowers, wrong bulbs. Here are some more of the seashell cosmos. These are a much lighter color. Same packet of seeds, but different color. This is my blueberry bed, and holy moly, would you look at this. Yeah, we got a little rain today. Goodness gracious. So, these are my blueberries. Some of my blueberries. I do have a couple other little babies that I've got rooting, and we'll eventually bring them out here and plant them when they're big enough as well. My pepper bed over here is doing great. I've got lots and lots of peppers all over the place. Pretty much every kind of pepper that I decided to grow this year. look at all of the pepperoncinis. There are gobs of them. Now, I did want to comment very quickly about something that was brought up in regards to having more than one growing season here in Alabama and being able to start late summer tomatoes, things like that. There was a comment in regards to planting indeterminate tomatoes and that those would continue to grow and produce tomatoes all summer long, all the way until the first frost or freeze. And generally, the answer to that would be absolutely correct. However, there's a little bit of an asterisk. It's really going to depend on where you live, because here in Alabama, northern Alabama, where we are, our summers are so intense and our humidity level is so ridiculous that our tomatoes, once you start getting into late July, beginning of August, they really struggle. We have tremendous pest pressure because of being in the south. We have lots of different types of blights and illnesses because of the high humidity and the plants not being able to dry out completely for sometimes days or weeks even. And then we also have the intense heat. And so when you put all of those factors in together, I would love to be able to harvest tomatoes from the same plants all year long, but it just doesn't happen here. The heat alone is an issue because when tomato plants get too hot, they will form blossoms, but then those blossoms will just shrivel up and fall off. And if the blossoms shrivel up and fall off, they're not getting pollinated, you're not going to get tomatoes. And so it actually gets too hot to produce any more tomatoes, and at that point your plants really start struggling. And unless you have like a high tunnel that you can shade completely and protect them from that heat, you're going to struggle. Last year I tried using shade cloth and it helped a little bit, but then I found that the blight got so bad because it not only shaded the tomatoes, but it also prevented airflow. It was kind of a catch-22. Shade them from the sun, now you got more moisture. So if you live in an environment that has a little bit milder summers, more pleasant summers, then you could absolutely grow indeterminate tomatoes and have those same plants producing for months. We're just not that lucky here. But because it is a long growing season, we do have time generally to start more and do a second round. Now, as you know, I was gone for a few days. We have had extreme, ridiculous heat this week, and until today we hadn't had any rain, and these bean plants are kind of struggling. So my fingers are still crossed that they will produce something, but I'm honestly not going to get my hopes up. I'm thinking maybe I should have planted something like herbs and maybe put this up on my porch where it wasn't getting quite so much sunlight. I know a lot of people have fantastic success with their green stalks, and so do not use my my results here as a as a representation of this growing system. All right, so my cucumbers are all the way up the trellis, almost to the top, and I've got baby cucumbers finally. As I had mentioned in previous tours, our pest pressure, one of our issues of pests this year were the slugs. And I ended up replanting my cucumbers about 3 times before I actually was able to get some to grow more than an inch tall. And this morning we harvested the very first cucumber. Mr. Smith was so happy. And we've got a few more down in here that will be harvestable before too long, and several little babies on this side anyways. My beautiful seashell cosmos over here got broken off from the storm. Oh, that's always sad. I don't know if Edith will eat these or not. Alright, the basil. This is my Thai basil. This is beautiful. I mean, look how big and bushy this one plant is. So I actually plan on coming out here and harvesting this very soon. The cucumbers on this side of the trellis, this is the Ashley cucumbers. These over here are national cucumbers. Lots and lots of blossoms. No baby cucumbers yet, but again, I had to replant several times, and this side got planted a couple weeks after the other ones did. Oh, wait, I take it back. I see a baby cucumber right down there. Most of the pepper plants in this bed have recovered, not 100% and not all of them, but most of them have, and are starting to produce some peppers like these right there. This bed in particular was especially hit by the slugs. I mean, I didn't think anything in this garden bed was going to survive at all, but a few things have. Alright, so coming into the in-ground garden, the beans are going crazy. They're going absolutely crazy. I'm coming out every day and I am harvesting as much as I possibly can, but I will say they are kind of slowing down a little bit. Oh, there I got more cosmos blown over from the storm. Hopefully they're not broken. I'll come out with a stake and stake these up here when I'm finished. So I came out this morning before all of the storms rolled in, and I harvested every bean that I could find, and yet I'm coming out here now and I'm finding more that I apparently missed when I was out here this morning. Beans. Look at that. So one of the major challenges that I am facing with this garden, and one of my big mistakes this year, was planting these beans on the trellis, and the trellis just being set up horizontally like a fence. Because, let me show you, the vines, the bean plants, have grown up this trellis and reached the top, had nothing to climb on any further, and so they've wrapped all over themselves and just created this great big knotted mess. In some places it has created almost ropes and come back down to the ground. I've got them wrapping all around my flowers, my zinnias, the okra. They're all over the place. So that is a lesson learned. In the future, I will not grow beans on the trellis set up this way. This configuration is great for tomatoes and other things that need support, not for beans. The beans need to be up in a vertical arch like these right here. These are my French green beans. They've got plenty of room to keep on going. Now right here on the very edge, this is actually a Chinese noodle bean that volunteered back from last year, and I have harvested several beans off of it. My peppers here in the bed are doing pretty good. Little wind blown, but hanging on. This is the Alabama red okra, and I have harvested quite a bit, and I see one down there that I missed this morning when I was out here. Either that or it's grown an inch since this morning, which is possible. My crookneck yellow squash is still producing, getting a little bit of yellowing on some of the leaves, but I kind of clean that up and remove most of them as I need to. And this is my Jubilee watermelon. And look right here. We got a watermelon. I've actually seen a couple out here. Little baby watermelons. So I'm happy to see that. Oh, I've got a sunflower down. So I have not walked out here since the storm hit. I've been busy in the house working on preserving things, freezing green beans, doing blueberries, and all of that stuff. So I'm kind of seeing this as my first walkthrough after the storm. Now these are those volunteer peppers that came back from last year. Still don't know what variety they are. I'm kind of leaning towards the Tabasco peppers because I remember last year the Tabasco peppers were very slow to produce, but now I am noticing yellow blossoms. They're kind of yellow. They're sort of an ivory color, but I am leaning towards the Tabasco peppers. We'll know for sure in a few weeks. Now my butternut squash plants over there are getting kind of sparse looking. The heat has just done a number on these. Butternut squash likes the shade, which is why I had planted these sunflowers on the south side of them to try and shade them. I had to plant them multiple times. I really wanted them to be growing up, but for the most part the squash plants did okay. It's just in the past week that they've really started to struggle, and I think it is because of the extreme heat. One of the things that I need to figure out is I don't actually know when to harvest these. These are midget butternut squash, so they don't actually get full size, and I don't know when I should harvest them. Now I have a bunch of them all over the place, and so maybe because the vines are starting to die back, they might actually be getting close to harvest size or ready for harvest. I need to look that up. I think I remember reading something about when the vines start shriveling back, that's when it's time to harvest. I've only grown butternut squash one other time, and it was the year before last, which is the year I got super sick, and even though I had a ton of butternut squash out here in the garden growing, I wasn't able to harvest any of it because I couldn't get out here in the garden and work. But there's at least 20 of these little butternut squash out here, so I need to look that up. So the zucchini bed is still doing really good. I'm still harvesting quite a bit of zucchini. I'm not overrun with it, but I've got more than we can definitely eat in a day or so. Earlier today on my blog, cosmopolitancornbread.com, I did share a tutorial on how to can zucchini, and I do want to give you a little bit of a warning with the zucchini canning method. That the National Food Preservation Institute does not recommend canning zucchini because there's a statement about there being missing documentation about temperatures and cooking times and all that, processing times. However, the recipe that I have is from the Ball Blue Book. It is a recipe that's been around for quite some time. It is a pressure canning recipe because zucchini is a low acid food. So while the National Food Preservation Institute does not necessarily recommend it, I do have it out there. I have used it myself, and so whether it is safe or not, I would say do your homework and decide for yourself if that is something you are willing to do. I don't want to say it's totally safe, go for it, do it, but I don't want to say it isn't. So I will let you decide. All right, here we are again, raised bed, tomato bed. This is the bed that if you follow me on Instagram, you saw that giant stag beetle that I found in here. I was a little taken aback by that thing. It was about yay big. I'm glad I saw it before my fingers did. You can see I've got a lot of greenery that is gone. I have been trimming back a lot, getting some blight, getting some pest damage, just like out in the other garden, and just pulling everything back, trying to harvest everything that I can. Like this big, beautiful Dr. Weiss tomato right here. I've got some more vernissage down in there that are ripening. I came through and I heavily harvested this morning because I knew the storms were going to be rolling in. And just like in the other garden, I am seeing broken tomato plants. These are vines or stems that were kind of tucked up into the cattle panel. And so I didn't have them tied to it because up until now they had held just fine. But if you saw some of the storm that was earlier, it was pretty intense. We had rain going flat out sideways in sheets. So it was a little more than it could take. All right, so the last thing I want to share is about this bed back here. Now I had tarped this off to start killing off the grasses and the weeds and everything, and to prepare this area to put in a garden bed. And originally the plan was to plant corn. However, because of the whole green bean trellis fiasco, we have decided to change our course, and instead of a great big old patch of corn, we are going to do 2 beds, and I'm going to get some cattle panels, and I'm going to create some great big old arches, basically a tunnel of arches, and we are going to put in more green beans. While I've got a bunch in the freezer, that's primarily the purple pod pole beans because they grew so well and are better at freezing than canning. But we really want a bunch of canned green beans. Mr. Smith loves canned green beans. And so because I have not really been able to can very many of those this year, that is what we want to do here. And Mr. Smith agreed when I brought the idea up, because we do have a local farmers market. We do have several places locally that we can get some pretty fantastic sweet corn, actual sweet corn. And so we're not going to worry about it too much because you do need a lot of space to grow corn. And yeah, we definitely want to do the green beans here. So that's what's going to be happening there. So we are beginning to see a few things starting to draw back, starting to struggle, starting to wind down. The tomato production, again, because of the heat and the blight and the pests and everything else, those are probably going to be winding up before too long. I'm hoping to see all the rest of the tomatoes that are still on the vine ripen and be able to be harvested. However, with all of those broken plants, I don't know how many more tomatoes we'll actually get other than what we already have growing. The green beans behind me, I'm going to probably be pulling these out before too long. The knotted up vines are so thick, I don't think the bees are actually being able to get in there and pollinate very well. And again, no pollination, no produce. So those are really slowing down from what they've been producing. I'm not going to pull them out quite yet, but we'll keep an eye on it. And if they really start to slow down, then I'll go ahead and pull those out and make room for other things. I've got things I really want to plant in the fall garden this year, and unfortunately I don't have enough beds that I can just leave things and let them go to their full fruition without pulling them out to make room for other things. Eventually my goal would be to have enough beds that I can let them go and let them be and have other beds to start. That's kind of like the goal, but it's more than I can do all at once. And so every year I'm just adding a couple more beds. I do have that one bed that I built a couple weeks ago that's out in the front garden. I have not filled yet, I have not planted yet. That is going to be the first one that gets planted for the fall garden. And I intend to plant several different kinds of carrots and things like that in that garden bed. So while some things are struggling, it is still hauling in tub after tub of produce every day right now. The beans, the tomatoes, the peppers, and it's pretty much non-stop in the kitchen right now. It is a lot of work, but it is so incredibly worth it. So that is it. Thanks for hanging out with me here again at the homestead and coming along on the garden tour. As I said earlier, I generally do one of these every single week all throughout the garden season. And in addition to the garden tours, I do about 3 videos a week on homesteading, home cooking, and back to basics. So if you aren't already subscribed, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. You can also sign up for my free newsletter. That is a great way to stay up to date on everything that is happening on Cosmopolitan Cornbread, both the YouTube channel here as well as my website, where you can find hundreds of recipes and articles. So thanks for hanging out with me, and I will talk to y'all next time.